You've been walking for 6 hours. No water for 2 days. Every part of your body is producing sweat. And there's no shower waiting for you tonight. This wasn't a bad day, this was every day. For most of human history, there was no soap, no deodorant, no washing machine to clean the one set of clothes you owned. Entire tribes of 15, 20, 30 people lived, hunted, and slept within a few feet of each other for their entire lives. So here's the question nobody really asks. Did ancient humans smell terrible? And if they didn't, why not? The answer starts with something you probably didn't know is sitting on your skin right now. Humans have two types of sweat glands. The first type, eccrine glands, are spread across almost your entire body. They produce a thin, mostly odorless sweat whose only job is cooling you down. This is the sweat you feel on a hot day. And on its own, it barely smells like anything at all. The second type is the problem. Apocrine glands are concentrated in a handful of specific areas, mainly the armpits and groin, and they don't activate until puberty. Their sweat is thicker. And on its own, it's also nearly odorless. So what actually causes body odor? Bacteria. Your skin is covered in trillions of bacteria, and certain species specifically feed on the proteins and lipids in apocrine sweat. As they break it down, they release compounds, some of the same class of chemicals found in aged cheese and certain flours. That smell you associate with body odor isn't sweat at all. It's bacterial waste. And here's where it gets interesting. Buried in your DNA is a gene called ABCC11, and a single letter change in that gene determines something surprising. Whether your earwax is wet or dry, and how strong your body odor is. Researchers identified this specific genetic switch in 2006, and later studies found that the dry, low-odor version of the gene is carried by 80 to 95% of people with East Asian ancestry, compared to a small fraction of people with European or African ancestry. This isn't a modern difference, it's an ancient one. And some researchers believe it may be linked to adaptation to colder climates in Northeast Asia thousands of years ago. In other words, how strongly you smell today was partly decided by where your ancestors lived, long before recorded history began. There's an even older piece of this puzzle. Neanderthal sites across Europe have produced pieces of manganese dioxide, a black mineral deliberately selected and ground into powder. For years, many researchers assumed this was for body decoration, but a detailed 2016 study found something more specific. Manganese dioxide dramatically lowers the temperature needed to ignite wood, meaning Neanderthals were most likely using it as a fire-starting tool, not makeup, which tells us something almost as interesting. Even 50,000 years ago, keeping a fire burning reliably, the same fire that provided warmth, light, and almost certainly a place to dry out and clean up, was important enough that Neanderthals were engineering chemistry to make it easier. So, ancient humans weren't fighting some universal identical battle against odor. Different populations, in different environments, and even different human species were dealing with genuinely different biology. But nearly all of them still had bacteria to deal with. And the archaeological record shows they took it seriously. Start with water. Ancient camps were almost always built near rivers, lakes, or springs, and not just for drinking. Regular bathing in natural water sources appears to have been common practice across many prehistoric cultures, long before anyone wrote down a single hygiene rule. Removing sweat and bacteria physically before it had time to break down was the simplest and most effective method available. And it required no technology at all. Then there's fire and smoke. Many hunter-gatherer groups deliberately used smoke from specific woods and herbs, not just for warmth, but because certain smoke compounds have real antibacterial properties and can mask or neutralize odor on skin and clothing. Sage in particular has been studied directly. A 2007 study found that burning medicinal smoke reduced airborne bacteria by over 90%, and its use in cleansing rituals appears independently across Native American, Mediterranean, and other unconnected cultures. A strong signal that people were paying very close attention to what actually worked. Then, around 3000 BCE, the archaeological record gives us something remarkably specific. Egyptian tombs and medical texts describe deodorant pastes, made from citrus, cinnamon, and other aromatic plants, applied directly to the underarms, alongside the practice of shaving underarm hair specifically to reduce odor. This wasn't guesswork. Modern researchers note that removing the hair itself measurably reduces the bacteria available to feed on sweat. Ancient Egyptians weren't just masking the smell. They were interrupting the biology causing it, thousands of years before anyone understood what a bacterium was. The Egyptians weren't unique in this. In the Indus Valley civilization, archaeologists have uncovered some of the world's earliest known bathing infrastructure. Covered drains, private bathing platforms built into homes, and the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, a massive, watertight public pool dating back roughly 4,500 to 5,000 years. Cleanliness in some of the earliest cities on Earth wasn't a luxury. It was infrastructure, built into the architecture itself. Meanwhile, in ancient China, the written record goes back even further. Texts from the Zhou dynasty over 3,000 years ago describe people carrying sachets of fragrant herbs specifically to ward off insects and mask odor, and ritual bathing in herb-infused water. By the 3rd century, this had evolved into something remarkably close to actual soap, a product called a bath bean, made from ground bean powder, scented herbs, and egg white, used specifically to clean the body. The exact recipe was written down in detail in a 7th century medical text by the physician Sun Simiao. This wasn't folk tradition passed along vaguely. It was documented, refined, and improved on for centuries. An independent hygiene science developing on the other side of the world from Egypt with nobody comparing notes. So by the time you get to the ancient Greeks and Romans, the technology had become remarkably sophisticated. Public bathhouses, some large enough to hold hundreds of people at once, became central to daily life, not just for hygiene, but as genuine social infrastructure. Similar in some ways to how a campfire once functioned for much earlier humans. The Romans specifically used a mixture of oil and a curved metal tool called a strigil to physically scrape sweat, dirt, and bacteria off the skin. An entirely different mechanical approach to the same ancient problem. Then something strange happens to this story. In the centuries following the Black Death, much of this accumulated knowledge came under suspicion in parts of Europe. Physicians began to believe that hot water opened the pores and let disease into the body. And public bathhouses, once thriving, fell into decline through the 16th century. Hygiene, it turns out, isn't a straight line of constant progress. It can move backward, and it did in this specific place for specific reasons. But while bathing declined in parts of Europe, it was advancing rapidly elsewhere. During the Islamic Golden Age, physicians and scholars across the Middle East and North Africa treated cleanliness as a serious subject of study. The physician Al-Razi recorded some of the earliest known soap recipes using vegetable oils and alkaline salts, groundwork that later scholars built on for centuries. Public bathhouses called hammams became architectural centerpieces of major cities, engineered with sophisticated heating systems to keep water and steam circulating for hours. Regular bathing wasn't just tolerated, it was considered a religious and medical obligation. On the other side of the world, completely independently, Mesoamerican cultures had developed their own sophisticated answer, the temazcal, a domed steam bath heated with volcanic stones, appears in the archaeological record as early as 1000 BCE among the Maya and became central to daily life across the Aztec Empire. It wasn't seen as separate from medicine or spirituality. It was cleansing, healing, and ritual purification happening in the same enclosed space. When Spanish colonizers arrived in the 16th century, they were stunned by how thoroughly these cultures bathed, and then, viewing the practice with suspicion, they tore many of the bathhouses down. It's the same pattern seen in medieval Europe, a functioning, sophisticated hygiene tradition deliberately dismantled by people who misunderstood it. Which brings us back to that 6-hour walk. No water for 2 days, sweat-soaked, no relief in sight. Ancient humans in that exact situation weren't simply resigned to smelling bad. Across thousands of years, completely disconnected cultures, and in some cases, different human species entirely, people independently arrived at strikingly similar solutions. Water, smoke, specific plants with real antibacterial chemistry, mechanical scraping, engineered bathhouses. They didn't understand bacteria. They didn't have a periodic table or a microscope. But through generations of careful trial and error, sometimes lost and rediscovered, sometimes advancing in one part of the world while regressing in another, they built a genuine, functioning science of odor control. One that in some cases worked almost as well as what sits in your bathroom cabinet right now. The next time you reach for deodorant without thinking twice about it, consider this. You're not doing something new. You're continuing a project that started tens of thousands of years ago, in the exact same trenches your ancestors and possibly your Neanderthal cousins were fighting in, against the exact same bacteria, using methods they had to discover completely from scratch.